Hey, welcome to Parent Conversations. It's the last Monday in April. I was just telling Shirley the other day over the weekend that the year is almost a third over. Who can believe it's almost May? Because I certainly cannot. But welcome, like I said, welcome to Parent Conversations. And we have a series of mindfulness discussions that we're going to have throughout the month of May, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, if I got it right. If I didn't get it right,
you did.
I correct myself. Oh, good. Thanks, Shirley.
Mental health awareness in May. Yay.
Yay. Mental health awareness. Awesome. Hey, shout out to the Bear River Health Department, Central Utah Public Health Department, and Davis County Health Department. So that help make parent conversations possible. We can't do it without your support. So let's talk a little bit about our guest who will be arriving shortly. Her name is Dr. Kim Dwyer, and you might remember that name because we had her as a guest author during Christmas. She wrote a book called Rocky's Journey. It's based on a true story of a little owl that was found in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, I believe in 2020. Is when that happened. And she wrote a book on his experience and talked about how resilient he was. And then we had her as a guest speaker in December. It was the first week of December last year, talking about resilience. And she's coming back to talk about mindfulness with us for the month of May and this last week of April. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Dr. Dwyer. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, primarily working from mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral perspectives, including MB, CBT, and ACT. And I should have looked those up, and maybe I will do that while she's talking, and then, or we can ask her.
I'll do it right now. What was it? MBCT?
MB-CBT.
Okay, I'll go look that one up.
Awesome. And the other one is ACT, like ACT. When I think ACT, I think of the test that my kids had to take before entering college. Dr. Dwyer is very interested in the interplay of brain, body, and behavior, and helps her clients understand the interplay of physiology, biological drives, emotions, thoughts, and values. Dr. Dwyer additionally works with mental health providers and similar helpers, healers in private practice to launch, build, and refine their businesses through coaching and consultation services. So that's a little bit about her. She also excels in empowering her clients to manage stress and anxiety and allowing them to shift perspectives on times of stress and transition to see opportunities for growth, alignment, and self-authentication. And you can find her, I think at Dr. Kim Dwyer, drkimdwyer.com. That's it. So that's where you can find her. Shirley and I, even though she's in Colorado, Shirley and I had the privilege of actually sitting down and having dinner with her the beginning of April. It was a lot of fun. We just happened to be in Denver for, it was a PTA convention. And the last minute we decided to reach out. She was available, so we got together. It was a lot of fun. And we appreciate her support of our parent conversations, and that she's going to be with us for the next month. Now, while we're waiting for her to join us in a few minutes, I would also like to talk to you about a discovery hunt that we have. I'm going to...
Megan?
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt for just a minute to tell you.
You may interrupt.
ACT is assertive community treatment.
Okay.
And it's a service delivery mode that provides comprehensive locally based treatment to people with serious and persistent illnesses. And so I don't know, maybe that's now it's almost looking like that's a group, but anyway, but that's what the ACT stands for, is assertive community treatment. And the MBT stands for mentalization based treatment. So she's very focused on treatment using the mind and whatnot. So
we know the mind is a powerful tool.
We can certainly ask her when she gets here.
Okay, we can
clarification.
Do that. Yeah. We know that, well, the mind is, like I said, a powerful tool. And if we can learn to give our mind breaks in the form of all of a sudden it's mindfulness, then it's better on us physically, emotionally, spiritually, in all kinds of ways. Mental health, there's a lot to be concerned about with mental health. And if we can find practices for each of us that will help us to manage stress and other things in our lives, then we can keep ourselves healthy. Not to say that if you have a mental health condition that you shouldn't seek help, and you should never feel ashamed about seeking help for struggling with your mental health. But there are some things that you can do to maybe take the edge off, or things that you can do to make life a little bit easier on you. So, and
I would love to hear from the different, those of us that are here, what experiences do you have with mindfulness? For example, I know Megan does a lot with yoga, which is a form of mindfulness. I mean, what experience do we have here in this group before Dr. Dwyer arrives?
Yeah, Catherine, if you want to share something, I see you're on here, and you can get to your mute button or unmute button. We'd love to hear from you. But Shirley is right. I do practice yoga, and not as often as I want to. I tend to do better attending a class than, say, doing something at home or following a YouTube video, although there are lots of things that you can do on YouTube. But yoga is the very basics of yoga is about breathing and using consistent breath. There are different kinds of breath, but breathing in and of itself, even if you're not doing any physical activity, is a very productive form of mindfulness. When I end a yoga practice, you take a position where you're just lying flat on the floor. You don't have to, that sitting in a chair can work. And you're using your breath to just calm your body and your mind. If a thought enters your mind, the idea is to acknowledge it and let it pass. Sometimes, especially the last few months, I've had a hard time with that. And if my mind starts to wander, I tell myself, count your breaths. So I just return to a place where I can count the inhales, maybe to 4 or 5, and then the exhales to maybe 5 or 6. That's a very, very good form of mindfulness, just breathing in and of itself. A lot of people like to pray. Prayer is a form of mindfulness. Anybody else got any ideas? Shirley, what's your favorite form? Do you have one?
So I actually also have always, without necessarily calling it mindfulness, I've always focused a lot on breathing. I actually learned it when my children were very young, and I kind of do is I breathe in, for an amount. I actually it's kind of weird. I will start breathing in for 4 and breathing out for 4, and then I double it, actually I add 4 each time. And it's amazing how high you can get. I mean, I've gotten up to like 40, breathing in for 40 and breathing out for 40. But the interesting thing to me is I could never do that to start out with. I could never just breathe in for 40 and breathe out for 40. But as you build up to it. So, and then of course that calms my mind. Yeah. I also have I just got a book here. There is actually a curriculum that's called Learning to Breathe. And where each of the, each letter focuses on a different thing. So for example, the B is, paying attention to your body, and the R is for reflection, and the E is about your emotions. A is attention. T is tenderness. If I remember right, that's like being tender with yourself and whatnot. The H is healthy mind habits, and E is empowerment. Awesome. So anyway, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about this specific, a curriculum is really that a lot of the prevention coalitions are kind of picking up on and sharing with families. And awesome. So anyway, that's Catherine, kind of been my mindfulness up to this point, has really been surrounding the concept of breathing.
Yeah, it's a very powerful one. Catherine, you were going to say something, and then I noticed you had to mute yourself again. So if you can get back to your unmute button, we'll let you talk for a minute.
I have to keep muted because I have 3 kiddos running around talking to me. So our mindfulness that we started was, I think, about the time the pandemic started. We discovered Cosmic Kids Yoga, and I'm not sure where she's from. She sounds maybe like she's from Great Britain or something like that, but she does these little kid yoga practices where she goes through the different poses but tells a story along with it. So that's been really cool for our little kids, and the older kids, they enjoyed it for a little bit, but it's our youngest two that have really latched onto that. So it's almost become a daily thing for us when we are in the right rhythm.
That's good.
We'll jump
That's
on and do
awesome.
one. And we also, for our weekly family nights, do a calming activity, and we take turns leading that. So often it ends up just being one of those cosmic kids. But my husband's really good at looking up different things. So one time we did a taste mindfulness thing where we unwrapped a piece of candy and noticed how we felt the wrapper and how we smelled it first, and then the taste of it, things like that. So it's kind of fun to have once a week, just a few minutes to stop and look through a different activity to kind of calm our bodies and our minds.
Nice.
Yes,
like
I
that.
love that. And that's actually one that Dr. Dwyer, for our mindfulness, Mindful Mondays, that was one that we did recently, that she had done, being really aware of taste. And I'm trying to remember what it was with. But she had us taste a specific thing and really pay attention. So I loved hearing that you're doing that, Catherine. So I see Dr. Dwyer is with us, so I'll turn it back to you, Megan.
Okay. Yeah, we were just having a discussion introducing you, Kim, and talking a little bit about some of the things that we do to practice mindfulness, but we are going to turn the time over to you. For those of you that are live with us, if you have any questions, I would be happy to read. If you'd like to type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves or raise your hands. Meanwhile, this is meant to be a discussion and not necessarily a speech, but we'll turn the time over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Good to be here. Thank you guys for hosting this. Shirley, it's a raisin is what we had talked about. I caught the very end of that as I came on. It was, and I don't know why, but raisin is it's just like a classic mindfulness exercise, is paying attention to everything about a raisin. Maybe because they're cheap and they're tiny.
Raisins are not my favorite.
They're not your favorite? Then you can use whatever. I actually did a retreat, a women's retreat, and we did chocolate. And we had a couple different kinds. We had like dark chocolate and milk chocolate and white chocolate. So it was like experiencing like these different kinds of chocolate. And the nice thing when it's like something small, like if you don't want to do raisin, do like Cheez-Its or a Cheerio or something, is we tend to like stuff them in our mouth, right? Like usually if I eat raisins, there's like, well, I'm inhaling a bunch of them. So to really slow down and like taste one, it's just a different experience. It just opens your eyes up and your mind up to experiencing something in a different kind of way.
I will practice that with the few chocolates that I do have sitting around my house, and I won't just stuff them all in my face.
Yeah, I do remember that now. It was called Mindfulness with a Raisin. And I loved that title. I was like, okay, I gotta learn about this one. So love it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's good to be here. And like Megan was saying, this is not, in my mind at least, a formal presentation, but just a chance to talk some about mindfulness and answer questions. We can practice some exercises, whatever. So feel free to, unmute, turn your camera on, like do whatever. The more interactive this is, the more I think we can all get from it. So so just to get started, just because we often start at the beginning and what we're talking about, mindfulness as a concept stems from Eastern philosophy, and the most basic definition I've seen of mindfulness is it's focused attention to the present moment without judgment. So when I hear that, I hear three pieces. It's focusing our attention. So it's activities, like if we're doing a formal mindfulness practice, it's an activity designed to increase our attention, which is very different, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, meditation, it's about feeling totally calm and zen. which that might be the focus of other kinds of meditation. Mindfulness meditation is about focusing our attention. Yes, it can be calm and zen, but it can also be, if we're in a moment of discomfort, like it can be really uncomfortable to focus our attention. Like a situation I often will think of when I'm thinking about like my own practices of mindfulness is like times when I've had really strong, uncomfortable emotion, and I've used meditation to frankly help process those feelings, to really tune into the feelings. It's not necessarily like super enjoyable, but it can be cathartic, I think, because we'll talk more about emotions later, but I do think like the way through emotions is through them, not through avoiding them or stuffing them down or distracting away from them. But when we really bring 100% of our attention to them, we can process them and take whatever information is present and whatever information, like whatever reason they have for showing up, we glean that information and then we can move on from the emotion. So back to that definition, it's directed attention to the present moment is the second part. So it's present moment focus. So we can use anything in our present moment to direct our attention to. And when we get started with mindfulness, a lot of kind of beginner mindfulness activities are sensory based. So paying attention to something that comes in through our five senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you feel in your skin or in your body? So mindfulness of the breath is sensation, right? Like if you think about breathing and just think about how we experience it, we experience feelings in our body that tells us we're breathing. We feel breath on the way in, we feel fullness, we feel temperature changes, we feel movement of muscles, tensing and relaxing, rhythm of like your abdomen kind of moving in and out as you breathe. All those things are the physical sensations of breathing. You can also think of breathing as the opportunity for smell, like whatever smell is in the air. So if it's a fresh spring day and your window is open, like there's that distinct spring smell that I don't think I could put into words if I tried. But you know it when you know it, like, you know, when you smell spring, you know, when you smell like that it's raining not too far away and that the rain is moving towards you. Those are present moment information, and that can be our focus when we're being mindful. We can pay attention to those kinds of things. And then the last part of that definition is without judgment. So when we're paying attention mindfully and without judgment, we're not getting into a lot of mental chatter about information. We're kind of just experiencing it as it is. The judgment piece is our mind making sense of information. And when I talk about this, I always think about like little babies, and little babies come into the world and they sleep like 22 hours a day or something. No wonder they sleep so much, because there is information overload, right? Can you imagine going through the world with no idea of what things are, no concepts that you're fitting information in? You'd constantly be paying attention to everything to try and make sense of it. And our brain is really good at quickly forming concepts. So I can walk into a room and I can see a flat piece of, I mean, even furniture is a concept, but I can see a flat piece of furniture that's about this high. And I can look at it quickly and say, oh, that's a table, you should eat there. And I don't even have to say that in like the conscious part of my brain. My brain just looks and says, oh, okay, that's a table. Doesn't matter if it has 4 legs, doesn't matter if it has a post in the middle and like a flat thing on the bottom, like a tiny table on the bottom. Our brain is able to do that very quickly because we've formed those concepts. But we also form concepts about all these intangible things like friend or family member or nice coworker, mean coworker. Like we form all these concepts that we overlay onto everything. And while it helps us organize information quickly, we also tend to take information and shove it into concepts we already have. And like if you've done developmental psychology, you've taken a course on that, Piaget is connected with like the idea of schemas. So schemas are basically concepts, and we quickly assimilate information out in the world into the concepts or the schemas that we already hold. So if I have an idea about, again, using table as an example, if I have an idea about a table and I walk into like this contemporary restaurant and there's funky looking pieces of furniture that have like funny little mushroom shaped things around them, but they're all at about the right height for sitting and for dining, my brain is quickly going to assimilate that information, basically take that information and shove it into this concept I already have of table and chair, which makes that an easier situation to navigate. But I'm also going to do that with the idea, like I said earlier, of nice coworker and mean coworker. I'm going to walk into a new work situation and I'm going to quickly start to make judgments about people and put them into these categories that I figured out. And you can see how that could backfire very quickly, because now I'm not getting to know individual people and making decisions about, you know, who I would like to work with, who I might need to be, you know, a little cautious working with. I might be making them based on, you know, initial impressions that aren't necessarily accurate, or I might be even comparing. I mean, we don't like to admit things like this, but we all do it. It's how our brain operates. I might be comparing, you know, somebody with a certain tone of voice to somebody in my past that had a similar tone of voice, and now suddenly I'm lumping them into a category. So the without judgment part of the mindfulness definition lets us go into situations and really see things as they are right now, like peeling off all these layers of concept that we've already formed and just experiencing something as it is. So I just like spit a lot of information at you all. Reactions, thoughts, questions about any of that, about like the definition of mindfulness?
I related to something you said about hearing the way people speak and lumping them all into a category. This is going to sound really bad. I knew when I was a child, I was introduced to an adult that they grew up in the South. And as I got to know this adult, I realized this adult was not very intelligent and kind of rubbed me wrong. And now when I hear somebody with that kind of accent from the same part of the country, I automatically assume that they're not very intelligent and that they're probably, this sounds bad, but almost not worthy of my time. And that is so wrong. And I know it, but that's where my brain goes.
Well, and you know what? And here's the great thing about being like a person with conscious awareness. Like now that you're aware of that, like now you can say, okay, here's my tendency, is that I have this concept, like a form of concept that people whose voice sounds a certain way, you know, also have these other characteristics from this person in my past. And now you can be really intentional and aware. You know, when I hear that, I need to catch myself and really make sure I am paying attention to them in the present moment without judgment, so that they can show you, you know, who are they? What's their information? Like, you know, is it worth your attention and your time? As like a fresh beginning almost. So like in the mindfulness literature, some of the phrases that will come up around this are popular one is beginner's eyes. So we're seeing things, you know, like we've never experienced them before. You know, like again, like a newborn baby that doesn't have any of these concepts formed already. A lot of times, especially like in talking to kids about this, I'll say like, imagine you're an alien from another planet and you're here to study human beings and you don't know anything about human beings. So like, what's it like to experience how the sun feels on your skin on a warm day? And what's it like when the wind starts to pick up and you've been a little bit sweaty and now you kind of have this, like that chill? And even me just describing this, like I'm giving you concepts, quite honestly, like that's not what the feeling is. The feeling is a feeling. It's a physical sensation in your body. Like the words that we use for it are the concepts we've already formed around it. So, and it might just sound like it's almost like an academic exercise to do that. But when we get into recognizing our thoughts and our emotions, it can be really important to separate out like what am I actually like thinking and feeling right now versus what has kind of been given to me from past experiences, and it's coloring the way I'm seeing a current experience.
I like that. I like that a lot. Like you said, we are conscious beings and we can take what we've learned and ask questions about it. You know, take our experience, say why, and choose another path. being very mindful about it. I like that. I'm going to put
Yes,
that.
yes.
I
And we
really
can be
like how-
curious. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I really liked when you were talking about the, how our mind has assigned like definitions and so forth. It reminds me of, something I learned, several years ago, at least over a decade ago. Basically, it only has the definition that we give to it. Anything. I mean, anything in life, it's only what I think that it is. And so we can take anything that happens to us, anything that we see. I mean, you talked about a table. A table is a table because we have given it that definition. We could actually change it completely. For example, last night, my husband and I were watching a show together. And I noticed he kind of scooched everything over on our table and he sat down. He has been doing these stretches and he normally goes in and he does that on the, on the special table, that we have, the yoga table that's specifically designed. But I realized last night, okay, he didn't want to miss what we were watching, but he needed to stretch. So he redefined our little short mini table. I can't even think what it's called. Coffee table is what we normally think of it. He redefined it and he used it in a different way. And that's, I think it's so important that we remember that. And especially when we're, when we're having experiences that we don't like, I think it's important to remind ourselves it's whatever we choose to believe that it is. We give every experience we have in life the definition. So if we want it to be different, let's redefine it.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, and that being able to be curious about like is a situation what my brain is saying it is, like is the judgment, the narrative, the concept that I've already formed, is that accurate? And maybe like to what you were saying, Megan, like just that awareness and that intentionality of like, oh, I hear somebody talking a certain way and here's what my brain pulls up. So I like to think about this as like that moment that we have a little bit of awareness of like, here's what's happening. We're stepping back enough from our thoughts to watch how they're playing out and watch what the process is. And that's a space where we can make changes. So whereas previously, you may have had that experience where somebody talks this way, I'm not stepping away from it at all. I just immediately think, okay, this is this former person from my past, and I don't really want, whatever the judgment is. Rather than kind of attaching to that moment of saying, oh, I'm noticing this is that moment. That's where we have the moment to be like to choose a different path. So in mindfulness literature, we'll talk about thought diffusion. So fusion being glued to something, diffusion, we unglue from it. So that moment of saying, here's what it is, like, and I always think about this in my mind, like I stepped back enough from it that I can see it. And now I can say, is this something to go with? Like, do I want to get on this bus and go where it's leading? Or do I want to stop and think about, is there a different bus that's going to be more helpful to me? And maybe like curiosity can really inform that. So I don't have to say like, oh, I'm not going on that bus. I'm definitely going on this other bus, but maybe I can like be curious. Is there room for some other bus to use that metaphor? Is there room for some other explanation? Is there room for considering that somebody might sound just like somebody from my past, but they might be a completely different person? And if this person from my past was not, an influence I want in my life, maybe there's room for somebody who sounds real similar to be a great influence in my life, if I meet them in the present moment without the past judgment coming in.
I like that. I'm even drawing it further and trying to think how I could apply it to past experiences that were not positive experiences that maybe, and this is a big term, maybe there's a little bit of PTSD from. So I'm trying to figure out that too. So this is making a lot of sense to me. So
well, and sorry, I've got dogs who are alerting to something. Yeah, and okay, so maybe one reason I'm interested in mindfulness is I've always been interested in anxiety and anxiety treatment, and what happens in our body, like physiologically and in our brain when we're anxious. And PTSD is kind of on the extreme end of anxiety disorders. It's response to a trauma. And one of the things that happens, in a trauma is hypervigilance. Like we pay more attention to everything to keep ourselves safe. And we have this, it's called confirmation. Well, there's two things. We have confirmation bias in our brain, and we also have a negative bias in our brain. So our brain pays more attention to things that go against that are different, essentially. So we pay more attention, and that's a safety situation, right? If I have an idea about how the world should be, what my day should be like, and something happens that's unusual, brain says, oh, pay attention to that. We weren't expecting that to happen. Maybe it's danger. And then, so that's that negative bias. And then confirmation bias is if my brain thinks the world is a certain way, it's going to pay more attention to any evidence of that than to evidence of the negative or the evidence against that. So we develop these ideas about our own safety in the world because of, trauma, whether it's, a full-blown PTSD kind of trauma or just like negative experiences that we've had. Maybe I have an experience of, I'm just making stuff up now. Like maybe I go to a bank and there's a particular bank teller who was rude to me once. And I start to think, oh, the tellers at that bank are so rude. And now when I go into the bank, if I have a pleasant experience, it doesn't really register. But if I have a negative experience, you bet it's going to register because it's negative confirmation bias. And it's an agreement with that idea that I had about people here, are rude. And oh, here's a couple bits of evidence that I have to that. So from a evolutionary perspective, that's all about safety and keeping us safe. But we're talking about situations that are not life and death. So it's kind of like it's misapplied essentially, but like our brain and our nervous system is super, super good at keeping us safe, but we're in situations that we don't really need that kind of safety. But it's it's what we've got to function with.
And I did think it was kind of extreme when I threw it out there, but I can see the correlation, but yes, but we can take it down a notch just to go back to the whole being mindful, just to reduce stress even.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And even just from that perspective, if we have a body, like we all have a body that's designed to keep us safe, it's like our bodies are going to quickly pay attention to things that feel unsafe, that feel out of the routine. And we can be aware when that happens, like whatever your own, the better we are at tuning into ourselves, the better we're going to be at doing this. And we can teach our kids to tune into this as well. But like, if I notice like, oh, okay, now I've got tightness in my shoulders, or my shoulders are like up in my ears when I'm wearing them as earrings, like maybe that's my signal that like, okay, you're responding. You're responding as if you're out there on the savannah and a lion's going to get ready to attack you, when actually you're working on your bookkeeping or you're figuring out summer camp for the kids, like not life and death situations. I don't need all this muscle tension that I would need if I were out running a lion. So maybe I intentionally roll my shoulders back, take a couple of deep breaths, remind myself I'm safe. I'm in a comfortable home. Like, it might sound kind of kooky when I'm saying that, but like,
no, being mindful of your surroundings and what's causing the stress so that you can diffuse it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think of it also as like with stress and anxiety, it's kind of, can we befriend it? Like if we pay it, like rather than squishing it away and avoiding it because it's uncomfortable, or really like gluing to it and letting it dictate our day, I'm not going anywhere because the whole world is overwhelming and frightening right now. Can I like look at it, befriend it, and like ask it like, okay, why are you showing up right now? Like I'm trying to figure out summer camp. Why are you sending my muscles into like total knots and spiking up my heart rate? And maybe, if I get real quiet, like maybe I can hear, if you don't get summer camp figured out, then you can't work. If you can't work, then you can't whatever your financial goal is, fill in the blank, right?
Right.
And like we could do that and go off to like, you're going to wind up homeless in the street. And if I step back and hear that, like then I can say, okay, I hear you, anxiety, like I hear those fears, and I'm okay right now. I am also a grown, competent adult who can problem solve those things. And I've got a support system around me who's going to help me problem solve it when I can't. And, like I can answer all of those questions in a way that I'm comfortable with, but if I just let anxiety like be up here spinning around on it, it's not going to take me any place that's going to be helpful.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But it's practice. So when we do like these formal mindfulness practices, like the Raisin one that you guys were talking about when I came on, or sitting for 5 or 10 minutes with our eyes closed and noticing our breath, we're practicing that skill so that when we're out and about in our day and things get wonky or stressful, or whatever, we have some skills to come back to and to use. And just like if you've ever taught a child to ride a bike, you probably didn't throw them out in the middle of the 8-lane highway and say, okay, go ride. You took them to, a school parking lot on a Saturday afternoon when there weren't a lot of cars around, or a big field somewhere, where there's no traffic. And if they fall, they hit grass rather than pavement. Like we don't necessarily learn a skill when we're in the situation where it's going to be hard to apply because we're overloaded and overwhelmed and emotional. We practice it in a nice, quiet, contained environment. We get better at it, and then we can pull it out when we need it. And it's a little bit easier to use in those more stressful environments. So that said, that might be a good segue into just doing a brief mindfulness practice. I can lead you all in we'll just do a brief guided meditation of noticing the breath. So if you are game, sometimes people will ask about like, how should your posture be when you're meditating? And you can go read about formal mindfulness techniques and teachers and different traditions and what they say. Essentially, you just want your body to feel supported and relaxed and comfortable. So for a lot of people, sitting on the floor, if that's accessible to you, sitting on the floor can kind of line your spine up a little bit better than a soft, like the chair that I'm in. I'm kind of like melting into it if I sit back. But if I get myself sitting with my spine aligned a little bit more, just like roll your head around a little bit until it feels comfortable and supported. And shoulders, you might want to roll them a couple times, just kind of get the kinks and the knots out of your body before you get started, so that you're not overly distracted by your body feeling uncomfortable as you're doing this. Some people like to lie down, which is fine. When I'm talking with people about this, I usually recommend, like, if you're going to lie down to meditate, also maybe try and find some times when you're not going to lie down, just to experience both. I just finished doing a 10-week mindful self-compassion course as I was a student in it. And one of the meditations I did lie down for, and I ended up falling asleep, which happens. And if it happens, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe that's what your body really needs in that moment. And I know for me, that's what it needed. But if we only meditate lying down, especially if we end up falling asleep a lot of the time, we're not necessarily training our attention, because I wouldn't have fallen asleep if my attention had been focused, frankly.
Yeah, I can relate to that. The end of the yoga practice, there's been a couple times I've almost fallen asleep, but there was one time that I was just so, I'll just say, zened out that I didn't hear the teacher end the class and ask everybody to sit up. So I wasn't asleep, but I was not there.
You're kind of drifting, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's fine to meditate laying down, but if you're only using it as like a way to bridge into sleep, I think it's going to be harder to then, like, it's going to be harder to use it like walking around your life and having a moment of like, okay, here's the time when I really need to be mindful and intentional. because your brain's already like disassociated with that, associated that with this is what I do to go to sleep.
That makes sense.
When we're trying to strengthen our attention, quite honestly, and to go to sleep, we actually like our attention gets kind of like diffuse. Like we stop attending to one thing, and our mind just kind of roams where it goes. If you pay attention to what's going on right before you fall asleep, like your brain's kind of all over the place. So anyway, back to our practice. If you just get your body settled in a way that feels supported, and you can either close your eyes or find a spot about 18 inches or so ahead of you to kind of look at with a defocused gaze. So you're not really staring at something, you're just kind of letting your eyes relax. And if you do have your eyes open, when they start to get heavy, if you want to close them, just go ahead and close them. And we'll just use our breath as a focus of awareness. So just get your body settled. Just bring your attention to your breathing. Just notice the breath on the way in and on the way out. I like to sometimes think of the breath almost like a wave that I'm riding. Being aware of everything about the breath, from how the air feels in your nose, in your throat, in your lungs. Noticing that moment of fullness, or might be feeling a little bit of a feeling of pressure as your lungs are full. And then noticing the exhale, following the air back from the bottom of your lungs, up through the nose and out. From time to time, other thoughts will come to mind. That's okay, it's totally normal. And when you recognize your mind has drifted and you're thinking about something, just gently bring it back to focus on your breath. Perhaps noticing the temperature of the air on the way in and on the way out. Maybe noticing how other parts of your body move with the breath. You feel the rise and fall in your chest. You might feel a gentle rub of your arms against your side bodies. You might feel your shoulders rise and fall. Just trying to notice these sensations. I like to think about it as like noticing them at a level beneath words. You don't have to put words to them. You're just kind of being aware of what you feel. And we're working to train attention so that breath becomes almost like an anchor on a boat. That's an anchor for our attention. It just keeps us in place. And the boat may drift a little bit from side to side, but it's going to keep coming back to that anchor. So your mind might wander a little bit. You just bring it back to focus on your breath. We're not trying to control the breathing. We're not trying to breathe slower or faster. We're just experiencing it. Each breath a completely new experience. And that wandering mind, it's kind of like having a new puppy. When you have a puppy that you're training to walk on a leash, it's going to wander off to smell something or because it saw a bunny rabbit or a squirrel. And you're just going to gently notice that the puppy's wandering and you're going to gently return it to heel. We don't have to get into a judgment about ourselves. We're not doing it right or wrong. There is really no right or wrong. We're just noticing and we're just redirecting our attention. And of course, we can return to this for longer periods of time or even shorter periods of time for just one breath of being mindfully aware. But for now, we can go ahead and start to let go of this practice, just letting your attention expand beyond the breath to the room around you. And when you're ready, just gently open your eyes. So that was about 5 minutes, more or less. And you can start with whatever period of time works for you. A lot of people, I think like a traditional meditation unit is 7 minutes. I'm not exactly sure why, but a lot of time, like when I've gone on meditation retreats, we've often done like intervals of 7, so 7 or 14 or 21-minute periods. But again, like it does not have to be that. It can be whatever you like. But finding 5 minutes, to just sit and be. There's an app that I like called Insight Timer that has a meditation timer on it. So you can just set it to ring like a gentle bell at the end, so that you're not, half thinking about what you have to do next and watching the clock. But it's just a gentle way of ending a meditation interval. So why do we start with breath? To quote a meditation teacher, Ron Siegel, I went to a training with him. He said several times, if you're breathing, you're 99% there. Biologically, if you're breathing, you're good, right? So your breath, if it's going to be there with you wherever you are. And honestly, it's a quick connection into the nervous system. Our breathing is one of the only pieces that has both autonomic nervous system and voluntary nervous system control. So we can notice our breath, we can change our breath by voluntary control, but our breath is also going to speed up when we're stressed, and that's out, until we bring our attention to it, that's outside of our control. But when we are breathing and we're really bringing our attention to it, it's like a built-in biofeedback mechanism. It's sending a signal back up to the brain of like, oh, she's okay right now. Like her breathing is slow and it's steady and it's regular. She's okay. She's going to be all right. And that's going to quiet the rest of the autonomic nervous system. It's going to slow down our heart rate. It's going to work on relaxing muscle tension. It's going to move us out of fight or flight and back into its parasympathetic nervous system. So like our quiet, sometimes they call that rest and digest. So that quieter side of our nervous system, it's going to kind of reverse like cortisol and other stress hormones. When our brain registers that we're calm and we're okay, we shut that stuff down. So, and even if that's not the goal of meditation, the goal might be to strengthen your attention. When we do it in a way that sends a signal back up to our brain, like, okay, actually, like my world is telling me I'm okay right now. That's for most of us, most of the time, that's probably an accurate perception and a helpful perception to be carrying around.
Well, I enjoy that, but Shavasana is my favorite in yoga, and that's where you get to lay down on the floor and breathe and not think about anything. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so breath is a good starting point. Other kind of beginner meditation practices, mindfulness of sound is a really good one because there's always sound. I don't know how much came through while we were doing that, but one of my dogs is asleep and is like having like a very active dream. Like I can hear my dog, like, I don't know, chasing bunnies or something in her sleep. But there's always going to be sounds around us, even if it's just ambient noise from like the heating and cooling system, or, sounds that are outdoors, sounds that are indoors, sounds that are indoors of our body, right? Like our heart beating, or, our muscles, moving around, or the crick in our neck, or whatever the sound is that's inside of our body. Another one is body sensations. So really noticing what we're feeling in our body. And you can, if you go and look at guided meditations, you can find body scan meditations that will go through like every muscle in your body and notice what's going on. And those tend to be a little bit lengthier meditations, but you can do like a kind of shortened version on your own of just 5 minutes of like, just, start with your feet and work your way up to the top of your head and check in with what's going on with every part of your body, like what feels loose, what feels tense, what feels warm, what feels cool, and just be aware of that. So I think those three are the ones that I like for like more formal meditations to get used to present moment awareness. But then like anything in life can be a moment of mindfulness. One of my favorite examples that certainly is not my example, I've read in literature a lot, is doing the dishes. Just feeling the warmth of the water, the scent of the dish soap, the feel like that, I don't even know, squeaky, slippery feel of the soap and the clean dishes. It's a pretty, like, in terms of sensory experience, it's a pretty pleasant experience. And it's when we get into this chatter about doing the dishes is when it becomes an unpleasant experience for many of us. Why am I stuck doing the dishes? Why didn't you line this pan with foil? It would have been so much easier to clean. Like that's all up here, right?
Right.
Some of that might be helpful information for the future, in which case pay attention to it. Some of it may just be like our brain, looking for something to complain about. So come back to like, notice the apple smell of the dish soap that you're using, and notice the little tiny bubbles that are in the air and how the light sparkles off of them. Like all of those can be really great and enjoyable momentary focuses.
I like that a lot. Okay, well, we're almost to 1 o'clock, and I'm excited that you're coming back for 3 more weeks, Kim. I'm excited I love this topic. Does anybody have a question for Dr. Dwyer before we wrap this up? If you do, you can unmute yourself, put it in the chat. Oh, Catherine's got something maybe.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any tips for adapting some of these techniques to younger children. I found their attention span is very short.
Yeah. So like sitting still for 5 minutes to do this might be too much for a young child, but just like, I think we can just weave it gently into the day, like even just by modeling it. Like if you're going outside and it happens to be one of those fresh spring days, like, oh, can you smell how the air smells different today? Like kind of just giving cues for that can help. Or, ooh, I can feel the sun on my skin. Can you feel the sun on your skin? Like just helping them to tune into that and notice it can really help. There are some meditations, like if you want to do something more formal, there are some good ones that are geared towards kids. And I've had people tell me like they can listen to them and like their kids are like running around the room, and then they might stop and be like, oh, I feel, blah, 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 like something that they just heard in the guided meditation. There's a book called Sitting Still Like a Frog. I can't think of the author. She's Dutch. Her last name definitely looks Dutch. I can't think of it. But Sitting Still Like a Frog. And I'm not sure now. The copy that I have came with a CD in it. I don't know if they're still doing CDs or if everything's like MP3s that you can download. But she has a whole bunch of guided meditations that go along with the book. So that's a good one for working
I
with
Googled
kids.
her name. It's Aline Snell, SNEL.
No. Okay. Yes. So that's a good one if you want something more formal for kids. There's another book that I like called, I will get it for you guys and I will have it next time. It's a really good book that's Kristen Greenland is the author. It's what's it called? It's like Mindfulness for Children or something like that, or Mindful Child at Play or something. It's got a title like that. Susan Kaiser Greenland, that's her name. Sorry, I don't know where I got Kristen from. It's
Mindful
called
Child.
The Mindful Child. Yep, that's it. So, and she talks a lot about like kind of like these natural situations where you can help kids be mindful. So those are some good ideas.
I had myself muted. Thanks for your question, Catherine. Well, great. Again, Kim, thank you. I look forward to next week. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now, and we'll do a little bit of follow-up afterwards, but join us next week. It'll be Monday, May 2nd at noon. I'll talk to you then. Thanks.